This is Jim Horn, and with our continuing Black and White Photography Master Series. Today I've got with me Mr. Dean Forbes, that's Forbes. He resides near Seattle, Washington, and boasts a substantial history as a semi-professional photographer with a wide range of subject interests. His current body of work predominantly delves into the concept of place, delving deep into our relationship with the landscapes we inhabit, whether they be urban, suburban, small town, or rural. Within this body of work, there exists a subset that tirelessly uncovers extraordinary beauty within the realm of ordinary and mundane, everyday scenes, ones that often go unnoticed by the majority. Although now in retirement, and he tells me for about a year and a half, which is hardly retirement, Dean previously seamlessly integrated photography into his professional life, providing his employers with photographs as an unofficial yet integral part of his role. Spanning the years between 2010 and 2018, he embarked on journeys to India during his work vacations, volunteering his talents to engage in documentary photography for nonprofit organizations dedicated to serving impoverished and rural villages. And Dean, welcome to the show. How are you, sir?
Well, thank you. Very well. Appreciate your being here.
Yeah. Are you you're in the state of Washington, as I mentioned. And have you had any of those severe, nasty freak weather kinds of things that are going on?
No, we're blessed in the Northwest to have probably the most benign summers anyway from across the country. So today it's been partly cloudy and in the mid 70s. If you look at those heat maps, we seem to be an exception, to severe heat this summer. Last summer we had a couple of heat waves, but generally up here it's very nice.
Well, I think the audience is going to really enjoy seeing some of your work. And I have to tell you this. I had to go back historically, and I had to go back to Walker Evans. You remember Walker Evans? You might remember Walker Evans. He did a lot of work for during the Depression work and so forth and so on. And when I first looked at your work, and I think the audience is going to agree, this is Walker Evans stuff. This is stuff that, as you said in your bio, this is stuff that people, they walk by, they don't pay attention, but this is Americana. This is who we are. So Dean, I think to get out of the way, one of the things people are always interested in, that's what I call the nerd factor, is what kind of camera do you typically use to do your photography with?
Well, the images you're going to show are all taken with a Fuji GFX 50S2, which is a digital mirrorless medium format camera. Okay. So it's a larger than full frame sensor. And I switched to that about 2 years ago or so from Fuji APS-C censored cameras when I was doing more street photography. So I went to the medium format to try something new, and also because I was shooting more inanimate objects, because these are slower cameras to use, and then they capture a lot of detail and resolution.
So are you the guy on the tripod yet?
I handhold as much as I can. I really don't like pods. So a lot of these shots are taken, good light. I'm not shooting just in the, sunrise and sunset hours. And so I just prefer to not be encumbered with a tripod. I bring one with me, but I almost never use it.
Okay. And that's pretty common because there's a lot of stabilization in these cameras. And I think as we look at the photographs, I think everyone will see that they're done in, it's not harsh light, but it's normal daylight, which is good. You can shoot a lot. You can shoot a lot faster. How about your workflow when you bring the photos in? Is it Lightroom, Photoshop, RAW? What's your typical workflow?
Well, I shoot RAW. RAW only.
Okay.
Don't shoot JPEGs. And I started learning. I'm self-taught in Photoshop, going back to CS2, so way back. And I think I used a book by Scott Kelby to get sort of familiar with it. I'm not a deep Photoshop user as far as using lots of layers and opacities and things like that. So I will start with the RAW file. Most of my black and white work, I'm using a plugin made by Maston Labs here in Seattle that emulates Tri-X.
Oh,
And
okay.
I like it a lot. I like what it does to the photographs. If I don't use that, then I use Nik Silver Efex Pro and start with their basic conversion, then tweak it from there.
Okay, super. Yeah, I find a lot of people, although they've a lot of photographers that I've had on the show, they use Lightroom and Photoshop, but like yourself, they don't go crazy. They touch it up where it needs to be touched up and so forth, or take out spots, but they seem to have your philosophy. Simple is better.
Yeah, on the black and white work, using the emulation that you can choose. There's a drop down menu for the emulation to choose the kind of light you want, but also set black and white point, maybe add some clarity, but and then sharpen, usually in another program. But pretty basic stuff. Yeah, I don't go deep in Photoshop.
And are you spending a lot of time on the street? Are you doing a lot of photograph? Since you've retired, are you doing a lot more photography? I suppose you probably are, right?
Well, having the time off, of course, I could do more trips. So, in other words, the work you're going to show is from 2 trips I made. So I've done, I think, 4 week-long or so photo trips, usually in the spring and fall since I retired. On a day-to-day basis, I'm doing less. And this summer, I'm doing less just because I've got some issues with my joints that I'm working on. And so,
Some of what we all have as we
yeah,
get
right.
older.
Exactly. Exactly. And to be honest with you, summer is not my favorite time because the light is often very harsh in the middle of
Yep,
the day.
I
I'm the kind of
agree.
guy who go out, and if I go somewhere, I want to shoot all day, and I don't want to just, travel somewhere just for the magic hour light. And so summer usually is a little bit less opportunistic that way. So I've been doing a lot
Yeah.
of stuff around my neighborhood, for example. And I actually bought a Nikon Z5 as a sort of smaller carry around camera, and I use it for adapting vintage lenses and using inexpensive Nikon Z lenses and just doing some basic things around the neighborhood. So it's just easy to walk out my door with a light kit and just wander.
Wander. Wander and photograph. That's the best thing anybody could do. It's like a meditation. Well, let's take a look at these photographs.
Okay.
I said early on in the presentation or the opening, I had to go back to Walker Evans. I looked through a lot of Walker Evans stuff after I saw your stuff, and I thought to myself, my God, I mean, you've really captured this stuff. And I know you're probably a humble guy, but I did go back and I said, hey, somebody's coming back and showing us Americana. Let's talk about this photo a little bit. This is
Sure.
these is sort of a grain elevator series. Am I correct?
Yeah, what I did here, by the way, thank you for that. Being compared to Walker Evans is high praise indeed, and so I am humble, and I really appreciate that. Yeah, this during my trips to Eastern Washington and to Eastern Montana, looking at the rural landscape in small towns, a couple of things I came away with. One is the juxtaposition of ubiquitous grain elevators among other elements in the towns. In other words, they really are a big part of, and usually the tallest structure in small towns. Also, separately, I have a series of just the grain elevators, and that I found that it's a sort of I call it American typology of these grain elevators. But the ones you're going to show, this was really how they integrate into other aspects of small towns.
Wow. What town was this, Dean?
Let's see. I think that's in Eastern Washington. I'm trying to remember. It was Rosalia. Um, I've forgotten. I have to look and see.
As I look at the photographs, they're exposed perfectly. Um, uh, it's it's things that we walk by. I think are
Mhm.
that you're capturing here. Let's talk about this photograph.
So this is quite different because I think this is in the town of Rosalia in eastern Washington. This is part of the Palouse region of eastern Washington. For folks who aren't familiar with it, it's a beautiful area of wheat growing country. It's rolling hills of just acres and acres of wheat and lots of small towns. So it's a very unique area, very popular with photographers, especially in June when the wheat has come up and it's very green. You just have these massive hills of green wheat. And so these towns, what struck me about this is walking in the downtown and looking up over the top of the Main Street buildings and seeing the top of this grain elevator sticking up in the American flag. I thought, well, that's really a different take on what I was looking for, was how these elevators become part of the small town landscape.
And I think it's so typical. I think the American flag adds a lot to this photograph, in my opinion, because isn't that Americana, the American flag flying someplace, not necessarily noticed all the time, but it's always seems to be there when you hit these small towns.
You do, and I found myself really drawn to compositions with the flags, or just seeing how people were flying them, and yeah, it just seems to be a natural part of the small town Americana.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah, yeah. I like there's a lot of sky, but the composition is just perfect.
Well, thank you.
Okay, here we. This really. When I saw some of the old Walker Evans stuff, of course he had older cars,
Yeah.
but this is exactly how he would shoot. Talk about this.
Well, this was interesting. Another small town in eastern Washington, the Palouse region, and you're looking at part of the Main Street, and it goes up this hill, and I went up there and parked in front of, I think it was the library, it was just to the right here, and looked back and said, "Wow, I mean, that really these grain elevators really dominate this town, and you have these small buildings." And so I just thought this was really good way to depict again this juxtaposition of the main agricultural economy and these little towns.
And the fact that it's in black and white, I think that all adds to the feeling of the photograph. I mean, our past great photographers would have used black and white sort of to give it that feeling. Yeah, I could see where the grain elevators are extremely large in that part of town. They're just almost overbearing, aren't they?
They are, and yeah, black and white, it's timeless, and so you
Yeah.
can do contemporary scenes or evoke an older time with this. It works well.
Yeah, great. Okay. Aha. Main Street, USA. Talk about this.
Well, this is in Montana, and again, I was looking at where the grain elevator was. What really drew my eye was the foreground shadows and the shadow being cast on the building on the left. And I thought there's a composition there, and you can see with the angle of the shadow and the angle of the street, there's a little bit of a leading line going down towards the end of the street, and then you have the elevator there. So again, a different take on sort of this juxtaposition of these structures with the rest of small towns.
And did you? I missed it. Did you say the name of this small town? You remember that?
Again, I'm sorry, I've forgotten the name of this town.
That's okay. It could be anywhere USA. Here in the Midwest, we have some of in the Midwest where I'm at, we have more of the fruit industry than we have the grain industry. But that you're right that there's that pointed shadow that just it sort of points your way. It says, "Hey, look over here towards the street," yeah, wow, okay,
Yeah, I chose that versus getting closer to the elevator itself,
yeah,
and just shooting that way. So there's a number of ways you can do this, but one of the things with doing these kinds of projects is stepping back and showing things in context.
exactly.
And so I've been doing more of that versus just getting close. But again, the series I developed of just the elevators, or the elevators dominate the image frame. But here I wanted to be able to show the context of these structures with the rest of the town.
Okay. Ah, this would not be a great photograph unless it had mom's laundry in there. I thought that was absolutely perfect.
Exactly. Again, and
Talk about the image.
well, this is Eastern Montana on Long Highway 2, one of the towns there. And actually, initially, I had processed this in color because the mom's laundry building was blue,
Uh-huh.
that blue metal, and then you have colors behind it. But then I, did a black and white conversion for submitting it to to black and white magazine, and I think it works well here as well. Yeah, I thought just having that mom's laundry, which I one of the most interesting signs I've seen in some of these towns. But again, you have that elevator back there, so it's showing those two in context, and the shadow it's casting is quite nice, and the sky has got some nice clouds.
Oh yeah, it's nice to get clouds in the sky, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Wow. What do you remember the name of this small town?
I'm trying to think.
This is not a test. It's okay if you don't. That's
No,
not.
Yeah, I should have looked at my images again before our show here.
Oh, then that's okay. I was just curious in case the listeners you can't they couldn't repeat this because this is great. Now I'm assuming that as we talked about earlier, that most of those shots were done in the fall, probably in the spring. Is that when you've been out there working?
This was September of last year.
Okay.
I did this trip. And it was still pretty nice, pretty warm, pretty sunny.
Yeah.
The the Eastern Washington shots were June of last year.
Yeah, and the Palouse, I had a good friend who unfortunately just passed away, but he did a lot of work up in the Palouse, and gosh, if people get a chance to go up there, I know there are a lot of workshops up there, and it probably gets a little crowded, and I understand that the Palouse now is some of the old farm buildings are deteriorating to the point where it's sort of losing some of its character. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think a lot of the old buildings are they are slowly falling apart, and there was a series of interesting barns that people were photographing that are no longer there. But it's a kind of place, it's a small enough area with really good roads that you can explore by yourself. You don't have to be part of a group necessarily. There is a Steptoe Butte, which is a vantage point about I think it's 800 feet above ground level, is where a lot of people go for the evening and morning light. You get the whole panoramic area of the Palouse, so it's a very popular spot. So it would be chock-a-block with photographers,
okay,
and tripods, because it really gives you this big overview of the area and wonderful colors, things like that. But if you get down on ground level and just drive the back roads and go to some of these towns, you see lots of interesting things.
Well, I would suggest to the photographers listening in, and I'm sure it's only photographers, but you've taken the small town concept and you've made us look at it again. When I saw the photographs in a black and white magazine, and that was the July 2023. In case you people are interested, it's a whole host of images, and that's where I've been looking for this master series. But I did like the images, and I'm certainly glad, Dean, you came on the show. I really appreciate it. I think there's so many. I hate to use the word amateur photographers, but I guess that's what we are. We don't earn a living by it, but doing such great work. And nobody gets a chance to see it. Everybody focuses on the latest camera. And that, to me, is not an essential part of photography. I think the essential part of photography is doing the kinds of things you're doing, getting out into Americana and showing us exactly what it's like. And you've sort of stimulated my my photography interest in that particular formats or in that particular genre. So that's really great. I appreciate you coming on, Dean. I thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Thanks.
Okay, sir.